who are the workers of God, and why were the workers of God chosen when they were? What's God's strategy here? What's His plan? And so he had these armies, he called them, his armies of, the first ones that he brought forward were the destroyers, actually. And those are the ones who found the flaws in the Bibles of the established religion. Basically, they were finding they're upseating what we were just talking about, which was the egregores. Uprooting it, yes. And uprooting the egregores, of course, has to do with the thought form or the unseen, the mindset, the whole organic whatever it is that's comes together when you think about any particular thing like Christianity or Buddhism or Brahmanism or communism or capitalism or whatever ism. There's something there. So so there were the four heads of the beast, and they were worshiping someone other than the Creator. They were worshiping angels rather than the Great Spirit, the I Am, Jehovah, the I Am. So and that was okay, because for a season it brought in those who otherwise would sort of miss the lesson that was being taught mankind. Because if they so anyway, but the time had come to because what they did, what the four heads of the beast did, is they created a foundation, said this is it, this is what the world is about. But the time there were people had lived with that for a couple thousand years, and they thought, no, well, this is times, this isn't quite it, that there's something the matter here, there's something more that needs to be there. And what is it? And now we can take Christianity, for example. And they said, well, basically don't worry your head about the world out there, the natural world. That's all, and that's all just in Christ's mind. Let Him deal with it. It's yours is to serve Christ and then to just not concern yourself with that stuff. And if Christ wants you to know something, He'll let you know and all that. So, and so these and sort of had like a lock on the world, Christianity and Buddhism, Brahmanism, and who did I miss there? Christian, Buddhist, Brahmins, the Mohammedans, yeah. And so they sort of like to have a lock on the world's religions per se in the main. And so that was the foundation for man, but man was starting to sort of not feeling quite fulfilled on account of it. And so, and like I said, they started wondering about the natural world out there. And that especially happened because of the Renaissance, many different things that happened. But in the Western world, it was the Greeks were sort of rediscovered, the Aristotle, and the questioning, trying to understand this natural world out there. And so they and a lot of people weren't satisfied with the notion that, well, you just leave it in Christ's hands and, don't worry your pretty little head about it. Or if I don't know if they said pretty little head, they might have said, you're a minion, and so you needn't concern yourself with it. But anyway, but his army, so God's army, so God raised up an army through the Lewis, the masters of generations from the spirit realm. And so, and these folks, they saw all these errors and started destroying then they say, well, this, that can't be right, and that can't be right, and that can't be right, and that can't be right. And so now the thing is, if you take away something, you have to replace it with something else. But now the angels there told man of Jehovah, the Great Spirit, but man was kind of dense and everything, and so they let man to sort of try and figure it out too, because if you're going to take away, if reality is not this egregore of Brahmanism or Buddhism, Christianity, Mohammedanism, what is it then? And so you had sort of different replacements that came up, replacement foundations as to what the true foundation was. And one of those foundations was deism. And they said, well, and now, actually, so when they destroyed all that, like the destroyers, now they were basically rationalists, saying, okay, the reason, the mind, so it has to make rational sense, reasonable sense. And so we see a lot out there in these religions that doesn't make any sense. It's not reasonable. It's not logical. And so they were using, so basically what the destroyers replaced with those old ones, they replaced them with reason, per se. And even deism, you see, deism came out of that reason because by reason you can think, well, there has to be a creator because of all the wonderful interplay of creation, of everything that's out there, and the wonderful consistencies of rules of interaction, which they call, laws of physics and all that stuff. So by extension, logically, rationally, there was a God. But since, they didn't really they felt like, they didn't have contact with him per se and all that stuff. They felt like he must have been kind of out there far removed. And some of them said, well, he's kind of like, he's like a clockmaker, because clocks were being invented around that time, with the pendulums and they had actually been around a long time with the water clocks and all that, but it was, the start of mechanization, the growth of it, expanding growth of it. So they sort of looked upon the Creator as being mechanistic, and so all this was a part of this replacement for the foundation. Well, that was one replacement. You had humanism. So now humanists, they said, well, look, okay, whether there's a creator or not, it doesn't really matter. What really matters is man and man's progress and what man can do, man's humanity to man. That's what's important. That's the foundation. But the foundation question was never really solved by mortals yet, because that was just the first phase, and the first phase was to remove the old foundation so that a new foundation could emerge or could be seen. The actual, it's an older it's the ancient foundation, the foundation that always ever was, just starting to be revealed, or you could see it then through the clouds and the fog and so forth. Well, the second army that God came out with, then his workers, then he raised up from generations before they were born, were then the money getters. So now when all this happened, so the timing of this is interesting, because the going forth ones to the destroyers, they basically started, you see, when they started, when you're looking at this, you have to look at, there's time where they're being prepared for their actual work. And that might look like part of the thing itself. And then really it's just the preparation for the thing that's going to be coming. So to set a real time, an exact timeline or an exact moment when that happened is sort of unrealistic in some sense. But basically, in Oahspe, we learn that God says it's 100 years. And that 100 years is kind of a catch-all figure for this. And actually from 1649 to 1682, start a lot of this movement and this turbulence toward removing that blocking that which was blocking people from seeing the true foundation on there. I mean, there's always this progression. God always has workers going. But we're going to just look at the ones that we're talking about that mostly, well, it's referred to in Oahspe anyway. And his second group of workers, for about 100 years, but essentially that peaked. Well, actually that first set of workers with the destroyers and all that peaked at around the time of the Revolution, the American Revolution. And this peak, Thomas Paine, from everything that can be seen from my point of view, looks as though he's like at the pinnacle of this. This is the foundation that came out from this. And now he didn't have it all right either. And now if you look at the founding fathers and you see what they founded, what they actually created. Now, they were creating the Constitution of the United States, the Republic social order, based on the money getters. Because as God said, the money getters were going to just remove the rubble that was left after the blockages were removed. The foundations were essentially cut. The intellectual I don't even know if you want to call it intellectual, but before that time, the Christians or Mohammedans or Buddhists or Brahmins would make assertions with 100% certainty, and that's the way it felt. It kind of actually felt that way, unless you were one of those few people, because there were some groups and here and there, who the Jewish people, for example, and others who didn't buy into that, or as we would say nowadays, which is a capitalist term, buy into. But that's part of the money getter thing. But so the money getters were, said, well, look, I don't care what foundation you got, here. What are the money getters? Now, the money getters, they believed in progress. They actually, when they started out, they believed in progress. And they said, well, they looked around and they said, well, look, the mankind is in the social orders this way, and we could live a whole lot better than this. And how do we get from where we are to where that is? And they said, well, look, if we aggregate our capital together, our monies together, we can produce a lot more than we can just by individual. Can't do much of anything. So that was like a part of a wisdom thing, wise dominion. Yeah, you come together and you have much more power when you do things collectively than you do singly. And so this money getting thing, that all got put into the Constitution of the Republic. Now, we're told in Oahspe about the Republic itself and what exactly it was supposed to have done. All right, from God's point of view, and perhaps, well, I'm sure Jehovah's too, to some extent, but Jehovah's got a lot broader perception of it. But this was so that man could have freedom of conscience, basically, the freedom to allow his own conscience. Man within himself could judge the right and wrongness of something. He could decide his own religion. And so that was the idea, that was the purpose of not having an established church or an established God in the
So can
Constitution.
I just say something here?
Yeah.
So if a person was within a community that was all Christian or all some other religion, then they basically get that pressure to either convert and be they were, or get ignored and shunned. But if it's based on money, doesn't matter what you believe, they're going to give you services and give you what you need to survive because of the money, and they're not going to hurt you because you're going to be given the money. So the money was just like, it just cut out all that preference for different beliefs.
That's very good. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Well said. Right. So, man then thought, okay, so we're going to improve the world, and we're going to improve it. And now here's the beauty of it too, because Jehovah also raised up philosophers to give man a philosophy to justify. Because you have people that want justification. So they had a number of philosophers, but the chief one amongst those was Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations and the Economy. They basically it provided the philosophy that an invisible hand would guide affairs. If by serving your needs and everybody's needs like that, I can get what I want by by doing this, and I'll get money back, and then this money can be applied, to it, and so it all works for the good because of an invisible hand that guides things toward goodness. But then in time, that got questioned, and people said, well, there's monopoly, and it's not that they were unaware of monopoly back then, but they thought that they had methods to contain it. But this whole thing about the money getters, yes, Ruth, you're absolutely right that it could be used. They didn't care what religion you were or what your beliefs were. You don't have to buy into my religion. I don't have to buy into your religion. We want to build a factory here or help you produce more crops or whatever it may be. And so initially that was good. And that went for about 100 years. And that was to endure until the time of the beginning of Klausman. And with the beginning of Klausman, then we had a new army, was the miracle workers. And the miracle workers, now, we had the spiritualism movement, basically a spell worth at the beginning from 1849 to 1882, and it culminated in Oahspe, which was like the peak of what was being said from the side of S. But there was also a corporeal aspect of that, but in the spiritual aspect of it, the miracle workers, then you'd have what it says in Oahspe, flowers coming forth, wrappings on walls, and objects floating in the air, all kinds of different things. All this was to destroy miracle worship. Well, but that was the spiritual thing. But corporeally, there's also the those who were corporeally oriented, those who didn't perceive S per se, it was all darkness to them or unknown. So they wanted some corporeal miracles. So the corporeal miracles, those were the scientists. And science became a miracle worker at first. Oh, look what they can do. All the wonderful things science can do. Look at all these contraptions that do this and do that. What? I can hear that person who's way over there, right here, as if he's talking next to me. What a miracle. That's the way it was back then. Today we take it for granted. Same with seeing pictures or just radio waves and all this stuff, all this technology. And the idea behind all this miracle workers, though, was to stop the worshiping of the miracle makers. And so to this, and now we've attained to that. Now you can have somebody who floating out in the air or whatever, and people are going to go, yeah, right, okay. there's an explanation for this. He's being hoisted by cranes, or it's a virtual reality clip. Who knows? But there's always some kind of explanation. So they're not worshiping the miracle as far as then the miracle maker telling you what to do. So, and that was like a freedom away from that, a breaking away from that. And we see that now, even in especially here in the social order of the United States, where a lot of people have been really downsizing the scientists, so to speak, as far as because the scientists, once in the past, the scientists said it all, it's gospel truth kind of thing. But nowadays, the scientist says it, and it's like, well, okay, and these scientists say that, and this group says that, and that, and all that. So there's no absolute there, per se, from the miracle worker side. And because you get one miracle worker that says, look what I can do, ha-ha. And then somebody over here will say, yeah, well, aha, look at this alternative. That's even better. You give me your money and your grants or whatever that they want. So, but now you see, when you look at those are the three that God listed in Oahspe, his armies. We have a new army, and I'll talk a bit about that. God has a new army of workers, and those workers are the vegans. The vegans are God's new army. And why are they God's new army? Well, this is the reason why. The first workers dealt with the foundation. Now, the foundation is always love, in Samoan. So and so the first workers were trying to get that stuff out of the way that was blocking them from perceiving the love that's in life, the love that is life, the love that is the Creator. And so that's ultimately what they were working for the foundation. And the second group that came along, the second workers, they were, the second pulse of anything has to do, it's called O in Oahspe. And it has to do, basically, it's an objective versus the first one, which is subjective. Love is subjective. Wisdom, wise dominion, is objective. You can see the bigger picture kind of thing. And so the second group, and it also allows you to draw together and to come to some type of a conclusion. And so that was the second group had to do with wisdom, the money getters, the wise dominion. So yes, it is wisdom, wise dominion. Let's get our capital together, and we can do something together. We can do this good and that good and that good and that good. Of course, you can also do evil with that. But the idea was used, and it's particular, David Ricardo and all, and Adam Smith and all that. So they was all well laid out that you do this for the progressive spirit of man, for humanism, you might even say, for the benefit of humanity. Now, they didn't discard God, but it was just a different way of looking at God. Now, the others of the false religions may have said, oh, well, you're disregarding God, you're being an infidel, but no, it was just a different way of relating to the Creator. And because you can't, nobody can get rid of the Creator. You can deny the Creator, but you can't get rid of Him. So, well, anyway, so that second group, the money getters, they did their thing. And then the third group came along, and they were the miracle workers. Now, what are the miracle workers? Now, they were the third group. Third group is S in Oahspe. And what the miracle workers did is they said, all right, we'll take the foundation, and we'll take the wisdom, and we'll put them together, and see what they, excuse me, and see what can be wrought from it. And we'll create a focal point here. We'll create an entity of sorts. And that's called ESK, the third condition in Oahspe. And so the miracle workers, so they brought everything. They're like the magi of old. The magi, and so the scientists are like the magi of old. And the miracle workers, the ones who worked through S, were like the magi of old, only they were doing things on the S plane. Now, you look back in Oahspe and in what man was taught in the ages, in the times past, for example, in the Spita cycle, the corporeal and the spiritual were taught together. And so you'd build pyramids and temples as well as understand, the spiritual aspect of it. And so, but in this time of our own age, in the third time of Third Army, the miracle workers, you basically had two classes. You had this S-oriented, and you had the corporeal oriented. Now, you had a few crossovers there. Crooks comes to mind, and he's the one that's in Oahspe that they show the vortexometer. And there were a few, quite a number of them, right? And yes, and he was an English scientist.
And he was was testing the mediums and found that was a true phenomenon.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So this breaking down of the miracle workers. So what this does, and the third pulse of anything has to do with power. Now, power, a thing is more powerful when there's more than one doing it together. So association is very important. But there's other things about power. One of the things about power is that a power ideally is supposed to be a fulfillment of wisdom, wise dominion. You fulfill the wise dominion through power. And power really means the ability to accomplish. And so what are you accomplishing? And true power, the highest power, accomplishes wisdom, wise dominion. And wise dominion accomplishes love, the foundation, sets forth ways for the foundation to manifest. And that's how come you can get the third condition, because of the second condition. Wise dominion helps that foundation to come forward. And so this is what the miracle workers are doing. They were bringing together the love and the wisdom, we may say, together into power. And of course, a lot of them had angelic help, because being mortals, meat-eating mortals at that, in darkness. And so coming out of that, so that was the third army. But the fourth army, the vegans. Now, what's the fourth condition? Now, the fourth condition in Samoin, we're told, is Isek. Now, Isek is, so it's the circle with the horizontal line. And basically, now this is the outer foundation, and it's encompassing the outer foundation. So the cosmos, which is the name for Isek, another name for it. So it has to do with, this outer foundation. Another thing that the fourth pulse has to do with is wholesomeness. So essentially, in this time that we're in right now, which essentially started around 1982, but if you can go all the way back to 1949 on the 100-year cycle, but it's basically going to really take off here after 2016 when that spell starts. That last 33-year spell before the dam. And this fourth pulse has to do with, all right, so man is casting about, looking to how can we, because another thing besides wholesomeness is harmony. Because the fourth pulse of anything is harmony. You have love, wisdom, power, harmony, symmetry, music. Those are the first six fundamentals. And so harmony really is a reflex of love. So an expression of love, or an exemplification of love, the closer it is to exemplifying love, the greater the harmony will be, the greater the reflex, you see. And so that's why in this time, people are casting about looking, how do we create a harmonious social order? Because we're looking at the outer foundation, the outer realm out here. This, you and I and everyone else, and how do we live together harmoniously? And because it has to do with wholesomeness as well, the army of Jehovah's, God's workers are saying this foundation that we have to have for harmony, social harmony, and for wholesomeness has to be vegan. It has to be. There's no alternative to it. And so the vegans are going forth like all the other armies of God. And you can see this acceleration going on about the veganism and how important it is. And in the world today, and it's going to grow because of these armies of God. Because they're very important because veganism, that's for the outer foundation. This is just for the outer foundation that we're talking about here. The inner foundation is actually has to do with, that's the Ieo, the inner foundation and the upright. But in order to perceive that upright, to get to that upright, you need to have a good foundation. You need to have a foundation that's vegan. It's the vegans who have the clarity of mind that allows them to see and to rise in this inner foundation. So, but the vegans army, as it goes out, they're not concerned now about people's miracle workers, whether they're a miracle worker or whether they're, you're going to have all kinds of vegans, is what I'm saying. But they're going to be on the cutting edge. You're going to be seeing them pushing humanity toward it, and also cajoling humanity toward it, and calling humanity upward toward it. And this is to make man ready for the Father's kingdom, because the Father's kingdom on earth, as it is in heaven, requires more than just this outer foundation. It requires the inner foundation. Even as the symbol of Hoi shows, you have the outer and the inner foundation. Hoi is number 6, the 6th symbol, and that represents, among other things, perfection and a perfect flow, if you will, music. And just like the 5th one, that has to do with symmetry. Now, symmetry is a reflex of wisdom, of wise dominion. And so symmetry, so you take like a round glass and you pink, like that, and it cracks. Okay, and that's your symmetry. Depending upon when you did that and the force and all that, boom, you get your symmetrical lines there. Well, that symmetry is a reflex of the wise dominion, of when it was done, how much it was done, and all that stuff. So that's like a visualization of symmetry. But symmetry is, the best symmetry is an exemplification of wise dominion. And that has to do with then understanding this, which is what we're coming up to later on as we move forward into the future. So essentially, we can look forward to the army of vegans being around for about 100 years in strength. Now, here's the thing about these armies of God. When God sends his armies out, okay, they set up one of these egregores, if you will, a mindset, a momentum, a way of living, and these then continue on, even though God is done with his work, then these continue on in that momentum. And that's how come, for example, you have the scientists who look back to the foundation of the rational deists, but also the destroyers, the destroying aspect of that. So for the scientists, you destroy everything that's standing, and if you can't destroy it, then that's truth. See, that's their approach, because that's the approach that was used back in the foundation, to destroy everything, and whatever remains standing has got to be true. Whatever you can't destroy logically. So that's what science says. That's their foundation. And then they're going to use the wisdom, the wise dominion, and that has to do with the aggregation and the using resources. The wise dominion, wisely using resources, bringing together things in certain ways so that certain results happen. And so that's their upper thing, the experimentation and the bringing together into experiments and all that. And so that becomes your the work of the magi, or the scientist, or the worker in us who does healing, for example, and healing through laying on of hands and that type of thing. So this next condition, you look at the third condition, and it's like the half circle with the diameter, and the Isek fulfills is the rest of the circle. It's the stuff underneath. The fourth condition. Yeah, it integrates it all, harmonizes everything. And so it's not destroying or doing away with that which was previous, but it's sort of fulfilling it in a way, but not necessarily in the false ways that it got. Because in the beginning, back then, when God sent forth his first workers there, they destroyed the old foundations of the false gods and all that, and they did not. They said to man, all right, now here is Jehovah is your foundation, and you figure that, and so you go forth now that and go build it on Jehovah. But of course, man didn't understand because he was in darkness and all that. So he started building, and so they built in this area and that way. So you had all these different people saying, this is the foundation, that's the foundation, that's the foundation, that's the foundation, that's the foundation, that, then forever, ad infinitum, however many there are out there. And so now we're coming into a time where, okay, all that is sort of being integrated together and say, yes, okay, there are all these, foundations, but there are certain commonalities amongst them. And one of those commonalities is, we're all here together on one earth, and that's the sign of Corpor too. And we learn, except for the horizontal line extends beyond any bounds that man can put on it, the outer foundation. So, and so the vegans, they say, well, okay, now, all right, they're trying to establish common ground, but for them the bottom line is veganism, and it all has to, because they look at sustainability and all this stuff, and these and people are casting about, as earlier said, for a harmonious social order. People are praying for a harmonious social order around the world. They want harmony, a harmonious social order. How do we get it? And this is where people are going to say, well, look, you can't have a harmonious social order when you've got people living in poverty. You have people in crime. Why are they in crime? Why do we have people in poverty? Why do we have this and all that? And
people are hungry.
And people are hungry, right? They're starving and in want and in need, right? And diseased and we have all these ecological problems, and how do we solve it all? And what's the solution for it? And so there's going to be this going forth to try and find solutions. And because the foundation, this is interesting to me because in that third condition, the third workers of God, the miracle workers, remember the foundation came forth with those who broke away the old stuff. And then you had the wisdom, or the dome of that which could perceive objectively with the aggregators, I'll call them. And then you had the miracle workers. Now the miracle workers, so wise dominion, the best wise dominion is that which allows the foundation to reappear, to emerge and come forth. Rather than saying this is the foundation, you allow it to see what is the foundation, and then we're going to support that and continue on with it. And so the third condition, the miracle workers, the culmination of that period of spiritualism, Oahspe came out and said, this is the foundation. Love, wisdom, and power. And so this is your foundation. And so we're given the true foundation, but it's not demanded of man that he accept this. It's not demanded of him that he apply this in his life. He's given the choice, and to either perceive, he can either perceive it now, or he's going to perceive it later on through trial, and because and everyone will eventually come to accept it. But until then, so you're going to have all these people trying to find out this way. How do we live a harmonious social order? And the vegans are God's workers, and they're going to say this is the foundation, veganism. Now we're told in the Oahspe that Jehovah said, an herbivorous man and woman of peace. First words out of his mouth for his commandments. Now when he said commandments, he's not saying, in my mind anyway, he's not saying you go do this or else. No, he's not saying that. He's saying this is the roadway I've opened for you. And so if you go, okay, Father, yeah, great, thanks. So you go that road. To me, that's like the commandment. It's almost like an impulse. But if you want to get more technical about it, inside is Jehovah speaking to the soul, and he's saying, if somebody's doing going to eat a piece of animal substance, and Jehovah says inside him, no, you shouldn't do that, or it's not the highest way, or there's a better way. That's probably what he'd say. There's a better way. So then a person, they either accept that and go, oh yeah, okay, I'll do that, or else they ignore it until the next time. But it's still this those who are vegans, you see, they're connected into this, and because of the wholesomeness, because of them, the wholesomeness will come out of man, so that the inner foundation can be perceived by man, because he can't perceive the inner foundation because of the meat eating and the animal substance that he has put within him. He can, to the extent that the angels of Jehovah help him to perceive it, but it's hard for him to keep on that track without falling down if he continues to eat animal substance. And so
you're talking about the Ishak, going back to the fourth condition.
Yeah.
That's the fourth God of God's workers.
Right.
But then what they're doing is laying it open for the fifth.
Yes.
Which is the inner foundation.
Right, the fifth, right, the inner foundation.
And that's the Hoi.
No, that's not the Hoi, that's the Ieo. The sixth condition
that's
comes after that, where the inner foundation and the outer foundation are together.
Right.
Together as one. And that's the ideal. Mm-hmm. Six is the Hoi, the ideal of perfection. It's called the Create Muse because you can never quite get totally to the all perfection, who is Jehovah. Only Jehovah is 100%. But we move toward it all the time. And that's the time of perfect flow, the time of perfect music, when it's, So that's going to be, the time after the vegans and after if God has another army coming up for this, for the inner foundation. But that inner foundation thing, see, that could start as early as 2049, and it can go for 100 years to 2149. When then the inner foundation, the next condition, opens up. Now, 2149 is when the Father's kingdom is going to be first established on the earth here in its fullness, meaning the third resurrection, meaning you have a community, and you have organic fraternities within that community, and together they have this crystalline connection and this crystalline light that allows them to be in communion with the third resurrection, which is Jehovah's heaven, which it goes up all the way up into Etheria, the crystalline heavens, and all that. But that's 2149 when that first starts, and then for 100 years, from 2149 to 2249, the rest of humanity will cotton on to that inner foundation, and so they'll have by then the inner foundation and the outer foundation, and that's Jehovah's symbol. You know, the Holy, the Holy extended, because Jehovah can't be contained.